Yeah, I'm back. I'm back. We have a great guest that's about to come on the Bobby's Auto Care hotline. I follow his articles. I follow his tweets. You know him as Chris Ryan, New Jersey Devils reporter for NJ.com. You can find him on Twitter at Chris Ryan _NJ. Chris, you are on the State of the Fan address with Sam and Nick. Before we begin, congratulations on getting married. How was the honeymoon?
Thanks for having me, guys. It was fantastic. We went to Key West for a full week. Other than losing our bag at the end of the trip, had a great time.
Oh, you were in Florida. You were in my neck of the woods. Oh, wow. I was going to ask for some wedding advice, but I feel like my wedding, like every week, it's another fire that I have to put out, and it's going to be different every week. Is that basically what happens when you get married? Like it's just a different fire to put out every week?
Yeah, pretty much. No matter how much you plan, no matter how simple you try to keep it, you're going to run into trouble every step of the way, including on the wedding day, which is the most fun part. But once you get through it, it all kind of calms down, and you get back to normal life after that point.
Well, I'm sure people are sick of us talking about our weddings and that nobody here is invited to. So why don't we talk about a little New Jersey Devils hockey, Chris? You're doing a little series here talking about the 18 most important Devils. I believe the first 5 are out, correct? The first 5 are out so far?
I think so. I think we started last Thursday. I've done every day other than the weekend. So I think we're through 5 up to 14, I believe.
Now there's we're only at 5, and I have 100 questions so far, and I don't even know who's number 13 through 1, but I think I have plenty to go off of here. I see it. Miles Wood was the first one you did something on. He came in at number 18. I am honestly surprised he even made it. I know a lot of people are kind of really down on Miles Wood, but he was the first guy you did. Can you tell me what makes him an important part of the Devils, or is he not an important part of the Devils? That's why he's so far down the list.
I still think he is an important part, as you see throughout the NHL. I mean, good teams, they're loaded up, not loaded, but they're good up and down the lineup. They need guys on the third, fourth line that can contribute and take a little bit of that pressure off that top 6. And that's what you've seen from the Devils, especially last year, where they couldn't really get that production down the lineup. So I think he's still definitely an important player and a guy who's probably going to line up in that bottom 6 there. Just with the way I made the list, I thought with what he did 2 years ago, being kind of fourth line player, being a guy that only got maybe 12, 13 minutes a night, but still found a way to put up 19 goals. I think that's kind of the role they need him to be in, especially with everything they've added in front of him.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny. I remember last year, a lot of us fans, and a lot of my writers were just talking about how, we got to give Miles Wood more minutes. He was getting 9 minutes some nights and scoring 2 points. And I'm talking about the playoff year. And then last year, he had the contract dispute. He missed part of training camp. It just seemed like he never got his legs back. And obviously, he was playing with a mostly injured lineup. He was put in situations for him to not succeed. But are you expecting a bounce back from Miles Wood?
I am. I think he'll have a little more success being able to put the puck in net. When I was writing him up the other week, just looking at it, he actually shot the puck more than he did a year ago. He was a little bit more kind of present in the offensive zone. Just with everything he did, the shots just didn't go in for him. So I think maybe he's not a 20, 25 goal scorer, but I think you'll see an uptick from the 10 he had a year ago, and just kind of a more evening out and maybe getting a little bit more lucky with what he's putting on net.
Yeah, I feel like when you're a fourth liner, if you don't get the luck, your numbers are going to pretty much tank. Now, the guy you have next is probably the one that it surprises me the most. Blake Coleman's one of the most popular Devils players, and he was extremely important last year. He, was one of the Devils' best penalty killers. And he found his scoring stroke. Obviously it's later in, for a player who's just in his second full season in the NHL, that's late in the career to finally hit the peak for him. But he scored 22 goals last year, and he really rewarded the Devils for giving him that 3-year deal in the offseason, but why is he so far down the list? He's behind, Zaka and Andy Green. Why you got Coleman so far down?
He certainly, when I kind of went back and looked at him, like, yeah, I probably could have bumped him up a few spots because, like you said, if I was doing a list from who were the most important Devils in 2018-19, he probably would have been top 5, just from everything he did and all the injuries they went through and what he was able to do and still produce no matter who was on the ice with him. So I think ultimately what my logic was he's still going to be a bottom 6 forward on this team when they're fully healthy. But he's still going to be an important guy, a guy who is going to be one of their top penalty killers, a guy that, like Wood didn't do a year ago, who can score in the bottom 6. And I think that's just where it kind of fell. And I think I just ranked the defensemen a little bit more just because of the Devils' need back there and what they need to get out of that unit. But that's kind of why Blake Coleman fell in that range. But he, again, like you said, you could easily argue that he's more important than a guy like Zucker or Green or even Butcher or maybe a guy like Wayne Simmons coming in at this point. But he's certainly a versatile guy, and I think he will ultimately be a big part of this team if they're going to do anything this year.
Now, when you're putting together the list, obviously we don't need to talk about who's coming next. We don't want to spoil anything. We want everybody to sit in anticipation for the next Chris Ryan article every day. But I want to know, when you put this list together, who didn't make it that kind of maybe surprised even you?
I think the two biggest I didn't include more because we just don't know exactly what they're going to bring this year if they do bring anything, or would be two rookies in Jesper Boquist and Ty Smith. They're two guys that could easily be in the opening lineup on opening night, two guys that could be with the team the entire year. But we'll have to see what they can do in training camp. And when it's all said and done, you look back at this, they may be somewhere in that 12-10 range in terms of importance of what they do in this team, because they're both high caliber prospects, guys that are eventually going to make an NHL impact. So with this, I just wanted to see what they could do before I kind of group them in with the guys that are returning.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. You don't, again, like you said, you don't know how important those guys are going to be. I mean, on paper, they look pretty important, especially when we're comparing, we had a piece a couple of weeks ago where we were talking about how this could mimic 2017-18, where they had Butcher, Nico, and Bratt kind of playing that role. It's kind of almost ironic that you have, again, a center, a winger, and a defenseman coming in that could play serious roles right away. Obviously, we didn't have those kinds of expectations for Bratt, or even, but I think Butcher was just signed at this point. But we didn't have the expectations coming in. We thought that Butcher was going to fight for a final spot. We thought that Nico was going to be like a third line center. We thought that Bratt was going to play in Sweden. But now we have these high expectations for Smith, Boquist, and you add Hughes to that list. So since they didn't make the list, obviously you think that the Devils could probably live with them. Not Hughes, but the other for Smith and Boquist, that they can live without major contributions from them. But what do you think you need to see out of the three in general? What would you need to see, you think, to make the Devils more competitive?
I'll start with Ty Smith because out of him and Boquist, I think he's the one that has a pretty clear path to a roster spot just with the way they're constructed and what they have left. And he's someone I do expect to make the team out of camp. For him, I think if he does make the team, he'll probably end up being in a role like Will Butcher was during his rookie year, playing in the third pairing, playing some sheltered minutes, getting some time, a lot of time in the offensive zone. And I think if he can come in training camp and show that he can at least handle a level of NHL competition defensively, he probably won't see a lot of top pairing matchups if the Devils can avoid it. But I think if he can come in and play that role like Butcher did a couple years ago, he's definitely got a role on this team. Someone who can move the puck and help drive possession and get some offense going for them at 5-on-5. And then with Boquist, he's an interesting guy just because you don't know. Do you want him playing in a bottom 6 role, maybe getting 10, 12 minutes a night, maybe a little bit of power play time? Or would you rather have him over in Sweden developing for one more year and then being able to come in just a year more mature, a little bit more physical, able to handle the NHL role. So it's going to be interesting to see what Boquist shows, and if the Devils are willing to keep him in a smaller role, unless he's able to play his way up. And with Hughes, like you said with Nico, you expect him to come and be maybe a third-line center a couple of years ago. But I think if the expectations are higher for Jack, you kind of think he can take that second-line center role, step in right away, be a top-6 player just with the pedigree he had coming out of the draft. And I think that should be the expectation for him going into the season.
So one more quick thing on Smith, and this is just because I can't personally figure it out. So maybe somebody who's around the team could maybe you could put it in a different perspective. But I'm looking at Smith, and I feel like for him to succeed, he needs to have a power play role. But when I look at this Devils team, you got PK, Biggie Subban, you got Will Butcher, you got Damon Severson. Sammy Vatanen can play power play minutes. Are the Devils going to be forced to play with 2 defensemen on each power play unit just to get these 4 extremely talented power play specialists on? Or do you think that John Hines is going to have one man be the odd man out?
That's a really good question, and it's honestly one of the things I'm most curious to see about once we do get to training camp and later into the preseason, because as you guys know, Hines typically goes with 4 forwards and 1 defenseman with his power play units. And even a year ago, maybe with Vatanen and Severson playing on a unit, it was a little bit of an exception, but it'll be tough to get all 4 guys time, like you said. So it's going to be really interesting to see how that shakes out. And with Smith, that would be probably his best area coming into the NHL, an area where he would be able to step right in and have an impact. So I feel like if he's on the team, the Devils will have to find a way to get him time on the power play, just because it'll get him going, it'll get him comfortable, and it's just a matter of just trying to figure out the configurations and who will be the odd man out, whether it's a defenseman or one of the forwards.
So, Chris, just to kind of get sidetracked a little bit, I see that there's a very large Taylor Hall conversation going on in the chat, and I feel like that this is a recurring theme for anything Devils related. Now that everything else has been taken care of, you took care of the number 1 defenseman role, you took care of the second line center role, you took care of the extra winger role. The only thing that seems left to do is sign Taylor Hall. Now, I'm sure you're going to have this question 1,000 times, and we won't make you answer what you think they should do, but we'll ask you, how do you think this is going to impact the team if we go into training camp and eventually the season with an unsigned Taylor Hall?
In terms of their play on the ice, I don't think it'll be that big of a deal. I mean, it's going to be a topic all year long if he remains unsigned, and it's going to be unavoidable for him to answer those questions, for teammates to answer those questions. But I think when all is said and done, when it comes to actually playing hockey, the guys will be able to kind of separate that. They're all pro athletes. Other athletes have been through that situation before. So I don't think it'll have an on-ice impact, but it will certainly be a lingering question that will continue to be asked, and rightfully so, until a decision is made, whether that's in the coming weeks, in the coming months, or on July 1st, almost a year from now.
Now, one thing that we were discussing is kind of who's going to be fighting for that last spot on the roster. And, you saw I'm sure you saw highlights of the prospect tournament, and there's been some workout videos. I don't know if you've seen, but PK Subban likes to show his workout videos. But we've seen some workouts from other guys too. When it comes to that last spot on the roster, when you look at the lines, it looks like there's 1 spot left. Do you see any surprises going for that spot, or is it as cut and dry as Jesper Boquist versus Joey Anderson as it seems?
I think there will certainly be some competition. Like you said, Boquist and Anderson will definitely be in the mix there. I don't know where you guys view Kevin Rooney, but I think he's going to ultimately end up on this team in some role just based on what he did a year ago. And him being on a one-way contract this year, I think he's kind of earned his right to maybe be on that 4th line or even just an extra forward on the final roster. But I do think, I know he didn't show a ton in his NHL time last year. I'm sure Michael McLeod will have some kind of say in trying to make a push for that roster, along with Nathan Bastian too. We only saw him for a handful of games because of his injury a year ago, but when he was on the ice in the NHL, he found a way to make an impact. He scored a few goals. and looked more like a player that was NHL ready from what he was a year or two earlier. So I think those guys will definitely be in the mix. And then you never know with a few AHL guys, maybe Fabian Zetterlund comes over and wows right away and shows that he's ready, even though I do think he'll ultimately end up in Binghamton to start. But I think there are going to be 4 or 5 guys that are in competition for that final spot.
I mean, you brought up Zetterlund, and that's a guy that I really like. That's him as a player. Just I feel like that he was really just in over his head last year when he was playing in the men's league. But that's going to really help him when he comes over and the AHL and plays with a bunch of other players that are more in the situation that he's in. It's hard to be an 18-year-old playing with a bunch of men who don't understand the situation you're in, but he's coming over. He's playing with a lot of guys his age, a year or 2 older. They can kind of build that camaraderie. So I think that's going to help a guy like Zetterlund, like Maltsev, like a couple of these other guys that they signed to come play for the AHL roster. But I'm really excited to see him in camp. Camp is a couple weeks away. We're almost there. The doldrums of the offseason are almost finished. And everybody's going back to Newark to kind of get their bearings. We kind of get to see this team, see it for what it actually is. And, that's going to be my professional transition to my next question for you, Chris. And I want to know, like, what do you think is going to be different about covering this team? Like I said, it starts in a couple weeks. You're almost at camp, but you reported on a team last year that was, it was a revolving door of minor leaguers and talking to players that, after they lost every night. And, it was a frustrating year to say the least. And I'm sure it was frustrating for even the beat writers on the beat, because you want to cover a winning team. You want to, get the fans excited, get people behind it. So what do you think is going to be different this year from this year to last year, just as a beat reporter on this team?
I think what'll be different, a lot, especially down the stretch last year when they were out of it and playing, like you said, all those minor leaguers, it was always kind of a focus on the future. Like, what are these guys doing to make their case for a year from now? What are they doing to develop? How are they showing in the NHL for the first time in their first 10, 15 games? And really even go back to my first season, which was 2016-17. That's kind of always been the focus. Even when they made the playoffs in 2017-18, they were a young team still trying to prove themselves. And it was always about what are they trying to build and how are these guys developing and what are they going to be in a few years when they can potentially be a contender again if everything goes as they plan. And now after everything they've added, drafting Hughes, adding Subban, signing Simmons, trading for Gusev, and having the Taylor Hall contract situation, it's much more about now for the Devils than it was a year or two ago. It's going to be the focus of how can this team become a contender right now? How can they live up to expectations, which are suddenly much higher than they were a year ago? How can they mold and kind of continue to grow and prove that they can be a consistent winner versus just a one-off like they were 2 years ago? So I think that'll be the biggest thing. How can this team handle actual expectations of contending in the league and being a consistent winner and maybe getting back to the playoffs?
Oh, with so much new talent, like you were saying, it's a lot of new. Which one would you say you're most excited to see in person? Which one are you most excited to see on a night in, night out basis?
I think the obvious answer would be Jack Hughes, just being able to see what he can transition to the NHL, just being an 18-year-old, probably going to be the first ever guy from the U.S. program to make that immediate jump. But I'm honestly most curious to see what Nikita Gusev does, just because he's such a unique case, being the fact that he's played in Russia his whole career. He blossomed into a star in the KHL. Just how is he going to transition to the league? And is he going to be a guy who comes in like Panarin and tears up the league and continues doing what he's doing? Or is he going to take some time to adjust to the league? So I'm just most curious to see how exactly he'll fit in and what he can actually bring to the table, because there's a pretty wide range of outcomes for him. And the ceiling of what he could be is very high. And if he comes in and shows it to be that, it's going to be pretty fun to watch.
So are you getting all your goose puns ready for every single game? Kind of throwing a goose pun in each NJ.com article?
Oh, certainly. We've been thinking as beat writers, myself, Abby, and Corey, going back to before they even traded for him, because a lot of fans were talking of trading for Gusev, and I won't say which one of us was going to do it, but One of us was just going to tweet a random Goose GIF with no context at all well before they traded for him, just to kind of throw everybody off. But it didn't happen, obviously. But we're working on our puns, and as you guys know, we like to be a little bit competitive and snarky on Twitter. So we'll have a few ones ready to go once training camp gets here.
I am very excited to see that. Now, the last question I have for you, Chris, before we let you go about your night and enjoy your recent nuptials, I just want to know, what do you expect out of this team? Realistically, I've seen it all over the map on some of the people who have covered this team and some of the people who just cover hockey nationally. I've seen, it's going to take them a year to really gel, and this isn't the year to make the playoffs. And I've seen Metropolitan Division winners predictions out of this team. So, Chris, help me out. Where are we right now?
I think the baseline for them is they're going to have to contend for a playoff spot. They're built for it now. They've loaded up. They're going to be healthy again, which is one of their biggest problems a year ago, too. So I think that's a fairly safe expectation for them to say that they're going to contend for a playoff spot, whether that be a wild card or maybe they sneak into that division race. With you mentioning maybe contending for the division, if everything breaks right, not just for them, but kind of around the league, if the Capitals and Penguins kind of fall off after so many years on top, and the Islanders and Blue Jackets regress, and the Devils are able to jump the Hurricanes and the Rangers and whatnot, I think there's definitely the case to be made that this team could win the division if everything goes right. But I think it'll take maybe a year or two before they're truly contending for a division title like that. But I think contending for a playoff spot, being a team that's going to be in the mix until the end of the year, is certainly a realistic expectation. That's kind of my view going into the year.
Chris, before we let you go, I've already thought of a little bit of a headline. If this situation ever happens with Gusev, the Devils beat the Rangers 1-0. Gusev game-winning goal, so it should be like Goose scores, Rangers lay egg. How about that?
I finished that one before you got there. That's not bad, actually.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
You don't have to pander to him. No, don't. I just want Tom Cruise night, so it could be Goose and Maverick one last time.
That's also very good, but you might be stealing a few of my puns in every season.
Or the hot Jester's dead, all that good stuff. But Chris, thank you so much for coming on to the State of the Fan Address, and I hope to have you on soon.
Thank you, guys. I really appreciate it. Anytime.
All right. Thank you. That is Chris Ryan of NJ.com. Is it still called the Star Ledger? They still have the print version? I don't buy newspapers anymore. I just go online.
Sam, I haven't lived in New Jersey in 10 years. So newspapers have died since I've been in New Jersey. So I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, I know. I mean, anytime I go out to a restaurant and get my Taylor ham, egg, and cheese, there's a Star Ledger there sometimes. And I start reading off of that, just like the good old days. Yeah,